Our next guest speaker is Busi Ngwenya. She is the Executive Manager for the Compliance Division at the BBEE Commission, and she's been there since 2016. She was a Director for the Department of Trade and Industry for just over 10 years. Her role included agency management, strategic and business planning, secretariat function, and handling special projects. One of the projects was the establishment of the National Consumer Commission, amongst many others. And she's an activist in promoting women empowerment and entrepreneurship through innovation hubs of learning. So let's welcome her warmly with a round of applause.
So on that note, good morning. I hope you're having a wonderful time. I didn't prepare a speech because I was told I must speak for 15 minutes. But then having sat in the table and discussed, I realized people don't even know who we are. It's a bit, it says a lot about us. So just short, I'll talk about us. B-BBEE Commission was established through the amended legislation in 2014, October 24. What was realized is that initially we had just a policy framework, and it was hoped that the markets would just implement and comply. But then, you know, at times people, when there's no traffic cops, we skip the red lights. Doesn't mean it's right. It's just that we know that there's no one going to do anything to us. But we keep endangering other people in the process. So that's how the commission came about, because it was realized that then we need to have a regulator that will monitor adherence to the implementation of the legislation. Now, today's session is about skills development. Some of the objectives in the Act says that we need to look at how we skill black people. But I want to say, not just black people, but women generally. And I was reading an article about Jane Goodall. I don't know how many people know about Jane Goodall. She trains chimpanzees. So what she says is that she was born during World War II, World War I. And then when World War II came along, she was just approaching matric. And as she was about to finish matric, she realized she didn't know what to do with herself, because during those days you either became a housewife, a preacher's wife, or you did secretarial work. That was what women could do. And I'm talking about women generally now. It doesn't matter whether you're black or white. And none of these things really appealed to her. She didn't want to be a pastor's wife or become a housewife. So she went for a secretarial course. In the process, she heard that there was a gentleman who was looking for a secretary to assist with his research in Kenya, Tanzania. So that's how she ended up working with the chimpanzees and started doing research on their behavior and all that and all that. And when she was finished, she realized she had all this research, but then, you know, universities, they require you to have undergraduate degree and all that. But with the research that she had, she managed to convince them that she could do a PhD. So I'm just showing that with the right tools, with the right interventions, nothing is impossible for a black person or a white or a woman, whether we white or black. Now, what the legislation is saying is that when you're skilling them people, you must look at what you're skilling them in. We're looking at what we call critical skills and scarce skills. So currently people are bending about 4IR, but 4IR happened like 5 years or 6 years ago. When you think about it, furniture was already being produced through 3D. You know, they put it in and then it goes through a conveyor belt. Now with cars as well, they no longer need really human beings, because they put them through, they throw a spec, you put them through, and then at the end of the day, if a car comes out. So in the mines as well, at some point we're going to see a lot of people being retrenched, because we're going to use machinery to go down, because currently we have a lot of casualties. Now the question that as a country we have to ask ourselves, when you're talking about 29% unemployment, 31% of that apparently is women, 56% of that is as we stand.
Sorry, please repeat.
It's 29% unemployment, 31% women, 56% youth. I think we need to have that sink in our heads. Now the question then, it goes back again to say, are we preparing our youth and the country for the future that we're living in currently? Because we're no longer talking about what is coming. We can see what's happening right now. I mean, people are being replaced by machines. So the question is, as HR and finance people, as we're training our people, are we preparing them to say, even if tomorrow you get retrenched, you should be able to still make a living for yourself. So the objectives, that's what they are all about, to say also, your workplace, I mean, I normally use the banking sector. When you go to a banking sector, your tellers, it's usually black people and maybe some white ladies. But as you move up the ranks, it becomes whiter and whiter, and then up the ranks, it becomes very male. So are we, especially when you're in a country of 47 million black people, are we then taking that into account to say, as we scale these other ones and prepare them to move up the ranks, are we also taking this 47 million with us? Because then you end up, we are going to end up with your Arab Spring Revolution if we don't have proper interventions. Now, what the legislation has done now is to say, because it used to say 6% must be used for skills development. What it has done now to say, at least 2.5% must go towards bursaries. Because what has been found, especially with the skills must fall, yes, that we had, is that most kids were saying, we don't have money, we want to go to universities. But how then do you translate that into tangibles? So the 2.5% is targeting the unemployed black people to say, then let's use this 2.5% to target it. But the interventions that I want us to look at is to say, what is our engagements then with universities, with TVET colleges? Are they producing the kind of resources that the country needs right now? Because if you are still reproducing skills that were required 10 years ago, but are no longer talking to the now that we're living in, we're still going to have a lot of youth being unemployed. I was reading an article about South Korea, I think it's South Korea or North Korea, one of the two. They had 7% unemployment. It now rose to 9%. And it made the government stand up to say we cannot have 9%. We're talking to 9%. 9%. They started putting interventions into place to say we need them to be bringing the youth into the entrepreneurial space, give them funding, give them tax breaks. So we need to find also those kind of interventions through the legislation to say, how can we use the legislation then to target this youth? That means we need to be talking to the enterprise development to say, how are we then assisting the startups? Because with enterprise development, you're talking startups, people who are not on the supply chain, to say, okay, they need mentorship, they need coaching. Maybe a person might, because there's a lady we met in Limpopo, all she needed, she does manufactures furniture. She says, I need a warehouse where I can do mass production. So if you've got space for somebody like that to say, can I then give you space because I've got this warehouse that I'm not using, or I can give it to you at favorable terms. So that's where the interventions of B-BBEE come in to say, then how do you do your ED or supply development to then bring all these people into the fray? I always say then, as you're doing BBBEE, don't forget the white kids, because then you might end up having done all well with the sites, but you're having people who are upset and angry. Just remember that if you're doing it for BBBEE, it must not be a tick box exercise. You must actually be bringing about real change. Now, what also it says is that when you then spending on BBBEE, it caps it at 15% to say you can use 15% for informal training, you can use 15% for, as we hear, accommodation, your catering and all that, but the cap is 15%, not more than that. The rest you must then use it for your critical and scale skills, which you'll find under the Department of Higher Education, which is supposed to. But I also recommend that companies, because you are the ones who know what are the required needs of the country, there needs to be that dialogue as well, because government can say these are the critical skills, but the industry might not be looking for those interventions or looking at them as a critical skill. One thing that we also find now is that there's a lot of fronting as well. Now the legislation does come with penalties if you do find somebody to do fronting. How does it happen under skills development? We had in one company that what they would do, they would get employees, put them in one room. Now the person who's doing verification will be calling from wherever. The manager will be sitting on the other side looking at them, and he couches them to say when they call, this is what you need to say. You need to say, yes, we took you for training, yes, we did this and did, without having done that. That's fronting. Other company, what they do now is that now we hear BOTi is giving us this training. We manage to then manipulate your certificate. And then we'll use a certificate now to say, next time Busi and Zota and whoever came to your training, knowing full well that they didn't come. So when the verifier comes, we produce the same certificate that we have forged to say yes. So those are some of the things that we see in BBBEE, which is part of fronting. So we're saying when you're doing proper interventions, make sure that you document them, because that's what verification is about, but also don't front black people. Make sure that you do it correctly. So skills development as an intervention, it can take us a long way, but if implemented correctly. Now, the young lady there, I forgot to take her name. She said her company she did not even know there's something in animal called BBBEE. Now, what I want to also alert people is to say, for government, it's a must that you must implement BBBEE. It's not even a question of whether you want to or not. But if you government procures from you, it's a must that they must require a certain level or a certain transformation within your company. Now, if your company is not implementing BBBEE, but the person that is procuring services from you is dealing with government, and their BBBEE level drops because of you, they can, as we've seen it, they can actually dump you and say, you know what, we no longer want to procure from your company because you're not transformed. So those are some of the things we need to be aware of to say, how do we then implement BBBEE? Because this is a redress mechanism. It's here, but it will, at some point, you must all then be competing on a similar level. I always say, if we implement it correctly now, there's no need for us to be talking about, well, some of us will be gone there, probably. But there's no need for us in 20, 30 years' time to be talking about BBBEE. We should now be talking about economic growth of the country, how are we all adding to it and implementing correctly. Thank you.